Translator, Dark Angel. Editor, Kurisu. Fortunately, Feng Yan's long saber was but a mortal object. Were it otherwise, even if it were merely a level 1 spiritual tool, there would be no need to etch or engrave any shred of martial intent upon it. Its sheer sharpness alone would already suffice to cleave Ling Han's sword cleanly in two. "Great sun-mad saber! Shatter and eradicate!" Feng Yan bellowed, striding forward with saber in hand. The blade flashed, and in an instant, ripples of power spread out. The force contained within those ripples was terrifying beyond measure. "What a fearsome saber intent!" Sheichang cried out in astonishment. By now, the decree's might from that spiritual infant tier elite had already been withdrawn, so everyone naturally rose back to their feet and turned to watch this clash between two youthful geniuses. Yet there were also those who turned their gazes toward Hu Niu and Yan Tianzhao. This was because these two had actually managed to withstand the might of a spiritual infant tier elite that had spread from the decree, a result both shocking and wholly unforeseen. Sheichang bore the name Overlord Saber, which was proof enough that his attainments in saber arts ranked among the highest in Rain Country. For even him to cry out in surprise showed that Feng Yan's saber technique was indeed extraordinary. N. Quite a number nodded in agreement. Whether they liked Feng Yan was another matter, but judging purely by merit, Feng Yan's saber arts were truly exceptional. Otherwise, he would not have so easily defeated the third imperial prince, Zhao Huan, and Kanya. Even Ling Han was slightly taken aback. The might behind this saber technique had already reached the level of a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. The Feng clan naturally could not possess a black-grade martial arts technique. In the whole Rain Country, only the imperial family possessed a black-grade high-level martial arts technique, and it was naturally impossible for Feng Yan to obtain such a secret art from the imperial family. Thus, it must have been taught to him when he went to the Winter Moon sect. Not bad. Not bad. No wonder he had won the favor of a spiritual infant tier elite. Feng Yan had only practiced this saber art for a bit more than a month, yet he was already quite proficient. He had at least grasped 20 to 30% of the true essence, which showed how uncommon his martial talent was. However, it was only uncommon. With a clear whistle, Ling Han swept his sword, and the Four Seasons sword technique flowed forth, meeting Feng Yan head-on. This sword technique was one he had taught to Liu Yutong. It was also a martial art he had used in his previous life. There was no need for him to familiarize himself with it at all. At a single thought, it circulated smoothly of its own accord, and a hazy drizzle formed, like a spring shower drifting down. Those tiny droplets were all condensed from Ling Han's origin power. Once they clung to one's body, the origin power would seep within and unleash an exceedingly terrifying destruction. What a superb sword technique! When they saw Ling Han's swordplay, quite a few people exclaimed their praise. Among martial arts, saber and sword were the two most commonly wielded weapons. Feng Yan's saber art had drawn gasps of shock from saber wielders, while Ling Han's sword art won the admiration of swordsmen. This young man's sword intent is definitely not weaker than Feng Yan's. That's right. Honestly, if I suppressed my cultivation to the gushing spring tier, even I might not be able to display such a powerful sword technique. That's strange. Why do I feel as if this strike isn't fully expressed, as if there is some reservation? Yi, you have that feeling too? With a long whistle, Feng Yan charged in with saber in hand. Ting! A crisp sound rang out, turning into a sound wave that spread in all directions. Those martial artists below the gushing spring tier began to bleed from ears, noses, and eyes, their appearance ghastly. Even a great many in the gushing spring tier could not help but clamp their hands over their ears. Ling Han and Feng Yan were both forced back. This exchange of blows granted them equal brilliance, and it was difficult to determine who was stronger. I underestimated you a little. Feng Yan snorted coldly. With a sweep of his long saber, he unleashed a bitterly cold radiance that raged like a waterfall. The saber rolls 30,000 feet and slashes all enemies under heaven. Sheichang's hand trembled, and he could not help but touch the hilt of his own saber, the rest battle intent flickering in his eyes. Such saber intent truly made his blood itch, stirring in him the urge to cross blades with such overwhelming power. That strike just now wasn't even his full strength? Gods, he's already so strong and he can still raise his power. This is far too terrifying. This time, Ling Han can only retreat before superior force. Amid the audience's startled cries, Ling Han lifted his sword again, and once more the spring rain appeared. Yet it lasted only an instant before the sword intent abruptly shifted. From gentle spring drizzle, it transformed into the shocking thunder of summer. Hong long long, thunder rolled without end, nearly deafening their ears. What? Everyone was flabbergasted. A chain of sword techniques? How can this be? The first strike wasn't even fully displayed, yet he can launch another. Moreover, the switching of sword intent is so natural that it feels like spring turning into summer, perfectly following the laws of nature. No wonder I felt that the strike just now wasn't fully expressed, so the sword intent was unbroken, not fully expended at all. This is truly too frightening. How did this fellow cultivate such a technique? But was that all? Ling Han's sword intent shifted once again. An autumn breeze rose, slightly chill and brimming with killing intent. It changed again, becoming the bitter cold of winter. Endless white snow whirled all around, and they could not help but wrap their arms about themselves, shivering with cold. One sword technique bears 4 sword intents. Gods, what a monster! Too much of a monster! How is this even possible? Everyone was dumbstruck. This had wholly exceeded their understanding. Such a sword technique should not have appeared on this mortal plane at all. Ling Han merely smiled calmly. When he fused the 4 seasons sword technique into one, its might neared the level of an Earth-grade martial arts technique. If not for the sliver of divine sense from a heaven-tier elite within him, he could not have used such a sword technique so smoothly. And should there be the slightest lapse, the cycle of the 4 seasons would break, and the power of the combined sword technique would drop even below that of using a single season alone. Spring rain, summer thunder, autumn wind, and winter snow. Ling Han commanded these 4 sword intents and advanced boldly toward Feng Yan in attack. Feng Yan's expression could not help but change drastically. If Ling Han had only used a single season sword technique, he would be completely unafraid, and could even rely on the saber's force to suppress Ling Han. But now that the 4 seasons sword technique was fused into one, it produced an effect where 1 + 1 was greater than 2. This was a sword array. It was equivalent to having 4 martial artists join hands against him. No matter how powerful he was, how could he withstand 4 Ling Han at the same time? He roared furiously, and his saber sank and stabbed into the ground. His right foot stamped hard, and he forced his body to fly backward in retreat. Hong, sword shadows surged, yet missed their target. Only the nearby tables and chairs were carved into fragments that flew into the air. Hu! 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 Feng Yan panted harshly. Just now, he had forcibly withdrawn his attack, which was the same as striking himself. Thus, he now felt miserable. He hurriedly swallowed a medicinal pill, eyes locked on Ling Han as a powerful dread flashed within them. He could tell clearly. One strike from Ling Han contained 4 sword techniques and 4 different sword intents. If it were only one, he feared nothing. But when the 4 seasons joined in concert, the might became too great. Even he did not dare meet such an attack head-on. Damn! At the beginning, he could have crushed Ling Han with a mere lift of his hand. Yet, at that time, he had not obtained the Winter Moon Sect's approval, so he had been cautious, planning to kill Ling Han 3 months later instead of acting immediately. He had never imagined that this single mistake would lead to his younger brother's death by Ling Han's hand, and that the latter would even grow to stand against him as an equal. This brat had developed far too quickly. Hadn't he? Get rid of him. He absolutely had to get rid of him. Feng Yan drew out the decree once more and unfurled it. The mighty suppression poured out again, and pop-up everyone was forced to kneel or sit upon the ground, compelled into a lower position. Die! Feng Yan wielded the decree like a whip and lashed it toward Ling Han. Characters flashed upon its surface, and for some reason it was eerily sinister. Translator, Dark Angel. Editor, Kurisu Ling Han did not fear the overbearing might of a spiritual infant-tier expert. Yet if he were struck by that person's martial intent, it would be no different from an egg hurled against a boulder. His only ending would be to be blasted into fragments. Thus, When that decree came flying at him, he could only choose to retreat. "Run! Run!" "Let's see where you can run to." Feng Yan sneered with icy contempt and pursued, brandishing the decree like a lash. Each time the decree snapped through the air, the terror of a spiritual infant tier's might grew heavier and heavier. Even the spiritual pedestal tier elites were sweating profusely, and the rest, needless to say, were all limp as mud, paralyzed to the core. Ling Han's silhouette darted like the wind, his mind racing as he plotted. If he drew the demon birth sword, then even if he could not rouse the martial intent within, the mere material of a level 10 spiritual tool would be enough to withstand the martial intent of a spiritual infant tier expert. Yet the problem was, if he revealed it before all eyes, how much attention would that draw? If he were alone, it would be fine. If the worst came, he could always flee far away and change his lair. But his roots were now in Rain Country, in Da Yuan City, in Gray Cloud Town. He could leave. But what of Ling Dongxing and the others of his blood? The Ling clan had already suffered one catastrophe. How could Ling Han bear to drag another fatal calamity upon them, especially because of him? No, he absolutely could not use the demon birth sword. Ha ha ha! Before the decree of a spiritual infant tier expert, how long do you plan to keep running? Feng Yan roared with laughter. This decree had been bestowed by his master. With it, he could fearlessly face even the Rain Emperor himself, let alone a mere gushing spring tier martial artist before him. Surrender yourself obediently to death and don't think you can escape. Ling Han employed shadow wind motion. This, too, was a black-grade high-level movement art. Since he had already stepped into the gushing spring tier, the yellow-grade techniques he once used could naturally be cast aside, all exchanged for the loftier black-grade arts. Feng Yan could not catch up. He had been taught a black-grade high-level saber art, and in over a month, he still had not mastered it. Where would he find time to learn other techniques? Ling Han was different. He had used these arts in his previous life, and even if he had not, with the comprehension of one who once stood in the heaven tier, how could learning them be difficult? Don't run. Feng Yan raged sky high, yet he could do nothing to Ling Han. The latter was nimble as an eel and slick beyond belief. Feng Yan simply could not strike him. Ling Han only smiled serenely and said, "Once the decree is unrolled, the martial intent within begins to disperse. You use it like this only hastens its dispersal. So how much longer do you think it can last?" When it came to grasping the mysteries of martial arts, who could understand more than one who had once been in the heaven tier? How did you know? Feng Yan was truly shaken. His master had told him this before. A decree was not a spiritual tool. It was only slightly more durable than a spiritual talisman, and its uses were still extremely limited. You don't need to trouble yourself with that. Ling Han swept his sword, sending out several streaks of sword qi. It was not his way to only defend and never counter. Feng Yan did not draw his saber. With a flick of the decree, the martial intent within was enough to shatter the sword qi, yet his temper only grew more and more restless. If this continued, he would truly expend all the martial intent within the decree, until it became nothing more than scrap paper. He was haughty by nature, and in an instant, a savage gleam flared in his eyes. He turned back, and the decree slapped down on a man's head. Martial intent surged outward, and that man's head instantly burst apart. Unfortunately, that man was under the suppression of a spiritual infant tier's might, and could only tremble where he lay on the ground. There was no way for him to dodge at all. He could only watch calamity descend upon him. "Feng Yan!" everyone bellowed in fury. What was this madman planning? "Ling Han, if you dare dodge again, I will kill everyone here!" Feng Yan declared coldly, killing intent boiling over. At these words, everyone was both shocked and enraged. Those who had come to attend the wedding today were all figures of the imperial city's upper circles, and some were even spiritual pedestal tier elites. Yet, Feng Yan actually dared to use their lives to threaten Ling Han. This was sheer insanity. "Feng Yan, you've gone too far." Many began roaring in rage. "This is between you and Ling Han. What does it have to do with us? Don't make us look down on you." Feng Yan merely acted as if he had heard nothing, and said icily, "You're all just a pile of trash. So what if I kill all of you? Who would dare do anything to me?" If I truly exert myself, it's not that I can't kill Ling Han, but that would force me to reveal my trump card, and that's not what I want. Since I can use a faster way to kill him, why waste the extra effort? Everyone grew even more furious, cursing and shouting. Yet there was one thing Feng Yan said that was true. He could do as he pleased, kill whoever he wished, and they would not dare act, because Feng Yan was a disciple of the Winter Moon sect. Who dared make a move against a Winter Moon sect disciple? At most, they could only drive him out of Rain Country. Ling Han, aren't you going to obediently surrender to your death? Or do you want so many people to die with you? Feng Yan laughed loudly, arrogantly. It was as though he were a cat teasing a mouse. With a swing of the decree, another dozen people were smashed into pieces. This fellow indeed possessed a trump card. For instance, he still had not used the mirror light body. Thus, Ling Han became even more certain that such a special constitution had to be consciously activated. A special constitution requiring conscious activation would consume energy, origin power, or spiritual energy, and all of these had limits. It was impossible to maintain it at all times. On the other hand, Ling Han's body of rock cliff was a passive ability. He did not need to activate it for it to take effect. However, even if he actively circulated it, he would not be able to further increase the toughness of his flesh. Additionally, Ling Han believed Feng Yan must have some kind of hidden secret. Otherwise, he would not have fought the eldest imperial prince to a draw, nor would he have been chosen to become the disciple of a spiritual infant tier expert. "Don't make me look lightly on you," Ling Han said. He naturally would not wait quietly to be killed. "Look lightly?" Feng Yan laughed loudly and said with lofty arrogance, "What right do you have to look lightly on me? Do you know that I'll keep this secret for the moment. You want to die in a vigorous battle? Impossible. I want you to die in a stupid and cowardly way." His thoughts turned and he said, "Everyone, I can spare you, but you must do something for me, and that is to apprehend Ling Han. I will give you the time of 3 breaths. If by then Ling Han is still not kneeling before me, then I can only use this decree and kill all of you." "How vicious!" "Do not doubt my resolve. Don't you all forget who I am," he said frostily. Their hearts trembled. Feng Yan was no ordinary Winter Moon sect disciple, but the personal disciple of a grand elder. Before, he dared publicly oppose the eldest imperial prince. Now, he even dared brazenly commit murder without the slightest restraint. Feng Yan could act as he pleased, but who could truly do anything against him? With such thoughts, Feng Yan's threat was like a blade pressed to their throats, making them quiver with uncontrollable fear. Ling Han did not speak. He only searched for an opening. "I've given you all a chance. If you want to live, you must grasp it firmly," Feng Yan said with a smile as he withdrew the decree and toyed with everyone as though they were all in the palm of his hand. He was immensely delighted by this feeling of standing above all others. It was at this moment that Ling Han shot forth like an arrow, instantly appearing before Feng Yan. Seizing the opening created when Feng Yan withdrew the decree, he moved swift as lightning, and his sword smacked Feng Yan's wrist. Pa! The decree instantly flew from his grasp.